Marcus was an artist who was famous for his unusual taste in art. He often visited auctions in search of rare things that could inspire him to create new works. One day, at a small auction in an old mansion, his attention was drawn to a painting. It is strange, a little scary, but at the same time, fascinating. The canvas depicted a dense forest illuminated by dim moonlight. In the center stood the figure of a man, his back to the viewer. His clothes were simple and slightly shabby, and his head was slightly tilted to the side, as if he was listening to something in the forest. The painting was unsigned, but Marcus felt an inexplicable attraction to it. Its dark shades and strange perspective excited the imagination. "Are you interested in this lot?" the auctioneer asked, noticing Marcus's intent gaze. "Yes," he answered, not looking away. "I'll take it." He won the bidding without much effort. No one else wanted to buy it, and Marcus found that strange. When he returned home, he hung the painting in his studio. As soon as he took a few steps away, he felt a chill coming from the painting. The figure of the man standing with his back turned seemed too real. Most likely it was just masterfully done, he thought, but the strange feeling that the figure was somehow changing did not leave him. In the first days after purchasing the painting, Marcus ignored the strange sensations. He was too busy with his new series of works, using the forest landscape in the painting as inspiration. However, he soon began to notice that something had changed. The figure, which had previously stood deep in the forest, now seemed closer. At first he attributed it to his imagination. Probably just the angle of the light has changed. But in the following days, he noticed that the distance between the figure and the viewer was decreasing. The figure was no longer standing among the trees, but closer to the edge of the forest. Its silhouette had become more detailed. You could make out the seams on her clothes, the texture of the fabric, and even something resembling hair, barely visible in the moonlight. Marcus could not believe his eyes. He took a photo of the painting taken on the day of purchase and compared it to its current state. The difference was obvious. "It's impossible," he whispered, stepping away from the painting. The next night, his sleep was restless. He dreamed of the same forest as in the painting. It was as if he himself was among the trees, hearing the crunch of branches under his feet and whispers coming from the depths of the forest. The figure from the painting was standing nearby, but now it was slowly turning towards him, although he still could not see its face. The next morning, waking up in a cold sweat, he rushed to the painting. The figure was standing even closer. Now it was almost in the foreground, and it seemed that its hand was slightly raised, as if it was about to take a step forward. "And no, it can't be," he whispered, feeling panic seize him. Marcus tried to take the painting off the wall, but as soon as his fingers touched the frame, a cold, paralyzing discharge passed through his body. The painting seemed to resist, not allowing it to be touched. Now he was afraid to sleep. Every night he heard footsteps in his studio, and in the morning the figure was getting closer. One day he noticed that a shadow had appeared at the edge of the painting, as if it were his own studio reflected on the canvas. Marcus hadn't slept in days. He sat in the corner of his studio, looking at the painting, and felt time lose its meaning. The figure in the painting was no longer part of the forest. It had stepped out of the shadows of the trees and was now standing right in front of the viewer, almost at the edge of the frame. Her features had become detailed, the fabric of her clothes looked tattered, and her face remained strange, unnaturally blurred, as if it were hidden by a thick haze. But the worst thing was that the shadow cast by the figure was now outside the frame. That night, Marcus heard a sound. It was a soft rustling, like someone moving slowly across the floor. His eyes darted from the painting to the studio, but the room was empty. "What do you want?" he cried out, his voice shaking. There was no answer, but the air grew heavier, and then the figure in the painting moved. She stepped forward. First her hand crossed the frame, then her foot. Marcus froze, not believing his eyes. The figure was standing in the room now. Its movements were slow, like a doll's, but each step filled the space with an unbearable cold. Marcus tried to get up, but his body seemed frozen in place. "Go away, please," he croaked, but the figure did not stop. She walked up to him, tilting her head to the side and reaching out, touched his forehead. The world around him went dark. When Marcus opened his eyes, he found himself in a thick, dark forest. The trees towered above him, their branches intertwined, blocking the light. Moonlight filtered through the dense foliage, and he realized where he was. This was the forest from the painting. His body did not move. He could not even move a finger. He felt heavy, frozen, as if he had become a part of this place. Ahead of him, he saw a figure, now standing with his back to him as before in the painting. The next day, a visitor to the auction house noticed an unusual painting in the studio. It depicted a forest, just as gloomy and dark, but now there were two figures standing in the center. The first was the one that Marcus had bought, but next to it, there was a new one, Marcus, frozen in eternal immobility among the trees. The painting hung on the wall, and the empty studio was filled with silence, as if waiting for a new owner. Carly turned to me.